Hello, everybody. This is Rusty Tweed. I'm the president of TFS Properties. And today, which is right at the end of April, we're going to be doing a webinar. It's actually the fifth in a series that we've been doing talking about real estate in today's coronavirus world. Now, we're kind of excited because the lockdown is starting to be lifted in many areas. And over the next couple of weeks around the country, we should see somewhat of a resurgence in the economy, which is a wonderful thing. I guess the jury's still out, though, to see just how much of a resurgence and just also what industries are going to be, positively affected. And there's still going to be some that are going to be very, very slow to come back. So again, it's all speculation right now, but things are changing. And then, like I said, once this lockdown gets lifted, I think we're going to see quite a bit of activity, especially some pent-up demand that we've had from before. Just so you know, as we're going through this webinar, if anybody has any questions, feel free to go to our chat room. You can see a link at the bottom and ask any questions. And if we don't get to them while we're doing the webinar, then someone in my staff or myself will actually get back to you down the road. So let's start off talking about interest rates. And you guys already know this. CD rates are unbelievably low, the lowest we've ever seen. For anyone that wanted to live off their savings in the bank, you can very much forget it. 0.6%. Is the lowest we've ever seen on a one-year CD. And again, if you want a 5-year CD, it's around 1.5%. So it's pretty hard to live off the interest off that. Now, when we talk about 10-year Treasury rates, they've dropped and they're pretty much at the lowest level, again, we've ever seen. They're at 0.6% for a 10-year bond. Now, when we talk about, on the next slide here, we're going to show you in the bottom left there, you're seeing a chart of the Treasury yields. And on the left side there of that, like I said, the left chart, well, the top line, the gray arrow, is actually what the rates were 3 months ago. And then the darker line below it is what the rates are today. So you can see that rates dropped quite a bit just in the last several months. Now, obviously, during that time period, 3 months ago, we were in the most booming economy any of us have ever seen. It was fantastic. And here we are mere months later, and the whole world is pretty much come to a grinding halt. So interest rates drop down. And so for a 3-month Treasury bond right now, it's literally just under 0.1%. And if you're going to get a 30-year bond, it's at 1.2%. Now, if you look at the right, you're seeing lending rates. The bottom gray line is actually the Fed funds rate, and that's a rate that the Federal Reserve is going to charge a bank to borrow money. And that you can see at the bottom right-hand corner there kind of dropped off. So right now for a bank to borrow money from the Federal Reserve, it's 0.06%, less than 0.1%. And a year ago, it was close to 2.5% for that same rate. Prime rate for banks right now is about 3.25%, and that's what you're seeing on that darker top line. And so the spread between those two lines is what the banks make. So you can kind of see, interestingly enough, that spread, which is the bank's profit between what they borrow the money from the Fed for and what they charge us guys, that spread has changed, has actually stayed constant, doesn't change. They make the same amount of money no matter what the interest rates are, just a matter of risk. But again, you see in the bottom right there that the Fed funds rate is about as close to zero as we're ever going to get. Now, the big question is what's going to happen going forward? Well, again, if you look at our rates and compare them to other industrialized countries around the world, we think our rates are really low, but compared to a lot of these other countries, we're actually much higher than them. And so you can see as they come up here, you can see Canada is about the same as us, but it starts going down from there. You know, United Kingdom, about 0.3%. France is 0. Japan, a little bit negative. Switzerland, Germany are both negative. So, you know, we think our rates just can't go down any lower because they're so low, the lowest we've ever seen. But when you look at these other countries that are actually very advanced, industrialized countries, they've actually gone all the way down to 0. And so when you kind of look forward, really depends on how things pick up steam after the lockdowns get lifted. When they do get lifted, if things pick up pretty quickly, then we'll see rates kind of hold up. But if things you know, are slow to pick up, then we actually may see rates go down some more. And if I was going to make a prediction, I would say they probably are going to go a little bit lower. You know, some industries are going to come back to battery fairly quickly, but let's just take the airline industry. Right now, it's actually at a total standstill. The amount of people flying around the world right now is almost nothing. I mean, I've talked to several people who have been in airplanes in the last several weeks, and there were literally 1 of 2 or 3 people on that plane. And I was talking to actually a client of ours who's in the airline industry, and he was talking about how the company he works for, their division, went from 500 employees at the beginning of this year, and they're now down to 50 employees, and he has no idea when those people are going to be hired back. So we really don't know how this is going to roll out. Some industries will actually come out, you know, fairly quickly back up to normal, but there's going to be a lot that lag way behind. And again, it may actually be a year or 2 years before some of these industries actually come back to where they were. It's going to take a while. So we're going to be talking about you know, the impact of the coronavirus on the real estate market overall. And for that, I'm going to bring on Matt Graham. And Matt is the principal broker for TFS Properties. He loves researching a lot of economic indicators. So I'm going to turn things over to him and kind of let you have his take on things.
Thank you, Rusty. So I'll talk a little bit about what's happening with real estate. One of the big impacts on real estate and the economy, of course, is oil. And oil prices have dramatically changed this year, in the last few months, particularly because of the coronavirus. They were substantially over $40 a barrel and holding there for a long time. And there's been a fight between Saudi Arabia and Russia on oil production, and they've both been producing too much when the world has been going down with its consumption of oil. And we actually got down a week or so ago to a negative price, which really wasn't a market price for oil. It was because of speculators on monthly contracts that they had to dump before they had to take possession of this oil. Anyway, but the point of the matter is the price is well under $40 a barrel, and we just got limited consumption. Freeways are empty, planes are not flying, and that's a real problem until we work through this. And we talked a little bit about how we get back to normal. But if we look at what's happening in real estate, despite what's been going on with the coronavirus, you'll see that rent collections are still quite good, particularly with industrial. 99% of rent collections this month are in. Apartments, very high, almost, 100%, with vacancies, that's probably pretty good. That's probably pretty cool. Office, we're seeing a little bit coming down. There's some big problems with retail. Grocery store anchored retails are like 50%, and retail malls are like 20% coverage. And we see great weaknesses in certain retail, not all retail. We'll talk about what retail we're very bullish on, but these retail that are dependent upon malls can be a problem. So we have to look at the country as a whole. And you're seeing, this is a map of where coronavirus infections have been high. The darker is the higher the infection. These are by counties. There are over 3,000 counties in the United States. And you can see in the highly urban areas where the infections have been high. And different parts of the country, the more rural part of the country, they've been low. And if you look particularly at Texas, you'll see that Texas is quite positive from the point of view of coronavirus. So as we said, weaknesses, we see trends, weaknesses in retail malls, except for the affluent areas. So there are certain markets that are very affluent, and those retail malls could continue to be very strong. We see a real problem, potential problem with commercial office space. And this is an effect of several factors. One is social distancing. If you take a look at, you've got an elevator that's got 20 people in it, and how are you going to social distance 20 people in an elevator? So getting people up to these large floors with open spaces that can be fairly dense, that's going to be a real challenge to overcome. And that's in the face of people and businesses discovering that working remotely is quite workable. And they're finding, I know one company that they weren't sure that working remotely would be workable for their business. And they were thinking, how can they do a test? Well, coronavirus came along and gave them the opportunity to do a test, and they've been at it 6 weeks, and they're like doing great. And as a matter of fact, this company of a couple hundred people have decided that they're going to relocate to Texas from California. So there's we see a movement from urban to rural. So densely populated city centers to suburban and rural markets, we think is going to be very strong. We see part of this is going to be from blue states to red states, like for existence from California to Texas, which is that movement has been going on for a long time. And so we see more along that area. So this brings us to our investment priorities. And we have two basic markets that we at TFS Properties focus on for our investors that are moving out of California and looking for investments into other states. One area is triple net properties. And triple net properties can have a very positive impact, particularly when you get a cap rate that is attractive, particularly as those interest rates that Rusty was talking about earlier go down. Great cap rates can really give you the cash flow, the best cash flow that you can get. We keep in mind things like we want to have well-located real estate. Regardless of what the return is, that real estate should be well-located. It should have quality tenants in it. And those tenants should have a long-term viability. Like here are 3 examples of 3 type of triple net leases that we've done recently with tenants. Like these are quality tenants that pay their rent, and they're part of the market that people are going to be going to in and out and getting pizza and Popeyes and stuff. They will eat that even if things get tough. Those restaurants will do well. Another investment priority that we have is residential rentals. And these can be apartments, they can be single family rentals, they can be manufactured homes, but people have a tendency when times get tough, they like to protect the roof that they sleep under and protects their family. So residential real estate is some of the most secure real estate there is. And we have some great experience with the properties that we put into people in different states around the country. So we think that's a great way to go. So the thing that we're going to be really concerned with is how does the country reopen? How does this happen? And the strength of the economy is based on consumer confidence, and it's going to be highly dependent upon the safety of both actual and perceived. And I think that the President's Commission has come out with some tiered ways of reopening. What are there, 3 or 4 tiers of steps? And I think if these are followed, we'll be in good shape. And I think that one of the things that I think that people in the United States have learned from this is to take this kind of thing seriously. So if something reoccurs, people are going to understand what social distancing is, how to protect themselves. And I don't think will ever be the negative effect of something like this that's at least similar, unless it's much worse. But similar, we won't have these negative effects down. And how this executes over the next couple of months is going to be telling, but I think the focus we have is the best focus you could have from an investment perspective. So thank you very much, Rusty. Back to you.
Great. Thanks, Mac. Yeah, that was very insightful. Well, good. All right, everybody. As you know, the IRS has extended the deadline for 1031 exchanges. So I know we've been getting a lot of questions about how that works and what the dates are, et cetera. And also any other updates that we have having to do with 1031 exchanges. And for that, I have Bill Exeter here. And Bill, we've worked with I've worked with Bill now for, hard to say now, well over 15 years, huh, Bill?
At least, yeah. It's we're probably approaching 2 decades. I hate to say that.
I know, we're all getting older together. Anyway, so Bill is the head of Exeter Exchange, and you can see information he's got there. But I'm going to turn over to you, Bill, and kind of let you explain how the extension is affecting everybody.
Sure, absolutely. We've certainly been getting a lot of questions about 1031 exchanges and the coronavirus, et cetera. And so I thought first we kind of cover the trends we've seen, and that kind of gives people a flavor for what's happening. There's good and bad mixed into these numbers, so it really depends on how you interpret them. So I thought I'd start with March, because March is really when people started to have significant impact in their life because of COVID-19. And our March numbers, we kind of thought would, taper off a little bit. That was the initial impact. And we kind of thought we'll start to see some tapering off as people have a hard time closing transactions or decide not to. And it didn't. The March was actually up for us, 15% over February and 20% over last March of 2019. So we expected a slight and immediate drop, and we didn't get that. So that was good. April 2020, our transaction volume is down. We've still got a week to go, but down about 40%. And we kind of expected more than 50 to maybe 70% drop just because of everybody being locked down and stuck at home. So it's 40% is a significant drop, but it's not quite what we expected. So that's also good. Our pipeline for the May 2020 process looks like at this point it's down about 60%, and that's kind of in line with what we expected, that 50 to 70% drop. So I think May is going to be kind of in line exactly with what we had anticipated. The encouraging thing is that we're beginning to see inbound phone calls, questions, emails, et cetera, pick up a lot in the last, say, week and a half. We've had transactions that were on hold, or we've had transactions where lenders weren't funding, or, et cetera, that all of a sudden are beginning to move forward. So that's much sooner than we expected to see that type of activity. So that's all encouraging. I think we're getting there, and people are now realizing, especially with the fact that Treasury has extended the deadlines, that I think they feel more comfortable in doing deals. So I think we're going to start seeing some more activity. With that, let's talk about the deadline extensions. And I first wanted to go over the historical kind of perspective. So in the past, generally, there'll be a natural disaster, fire, flood, tornado, hurricane, what have you, and the president would declare a disaster. And then Treasury would come out and would issue a 120-day extension for the 45 and the 180 days. So both the 45 and the 180 days would be extended by 120 days. In a natural disaster scenario, it's geographic specific, and it's also date specific. And that's not what we have today. With COVID-19, it impacts the entire country. It impacts every single citizen. And it's not date specific, so it's been going over a number of months here. So that kind of puts Treasury in uncharted territory. How do you deal with that? How do you grant extensions of time for all sorts of purposes when it's a moving target? So what we do is cover what we know so far. So the Treasury's issued a number of notices over the last, say, 30 to 45 days. And they're providing all sorts of extensions for filing deadlines and payment deadlines and reporting deadlines. The problem is the notices have provided a lot of confusion in the 1031 exchange industry. Generally, the notice will specifically cite a section in a ruling back in 2018 that grants the 120-day extension. And it didn't cite that particular section. So now we're left scratching our head. Does that mean there is no 120-day extension at all? And that's initially what we think. It appears that it will not apply because they didn't specifically cite that section. So that's where the confusion comes into the whole process. So what we do know for sure is the IRS has come out and said, if your 45th day deadline to identify property lands on or between April 1st or July 15th, the extension is automatic to July 15th. Now that's great if your transaction closed and your 45th day was in early April. You've got a much longer time frame up until July 15th to identify. If your 45th day happens to land on July 10th, you get a 5-day extension. So it helps some, it doesn't help a lot of others. It kind of just depends on where your transaction closed. So that we know that for sure. July 15th is the new deadline for anything that closes at this point. But the Treasury has also acknowledged that there's a lot of confusion out there, a lot of attorneys, a lot of trade groups, a lot of qualified intermediaries, including us, have written letters to Treasury saying, look, this doesn't make sense in a lot of cases. The April 1st start date doesn't make sense because people were locked down in March and it affected people in March and they couldn't get out of their house to look for replacement properties. So that's an issue. The July 15th is too soon. This is still ongoing, et cetera. And we really need to say we need the 120-day extension. And so that's what a lot of folks are asking for, but we just don't know. But they did come out and admit there's a lot of confusion out there. So they're going to come out with a frequently asked questions page or FAQ page that we hope is going to explain a lot of this. And we're really hoping that it's going to include that 120-day extension. But having said that, I think the fact that they're going to come out with an FAQ page as opposed to another notice, I don't think we're going to see the April 1st deadline moved up to like March 1st or February 1st like we had hoped. They might move the July 15th deadline back, but I think we'll have to get closer to July 15th to see what happens there. So we're really hoping that maybe in this FAQ page, it'll come out and say it does apply with the 120-day extension. We just won't know until they come out with that. So that's really kind of the confusion there. So we think that, June 2020 appears to be the turning point. I think that's kind of where it's going to probably plateau. And then from there, I think we'll start to begin to see some increases going forward. And it certainly seems that investor sentiment is starting to get to the point where they're feeling a little better. They think we've got through this. There's still a lot of stuff to go through, a lot of nasty stuff potentially in the next couple of weeks or month, but I think they have realized we probably made it through this. We just have to kind of tough it out. So that's kind of what we've seen out there in terms of 1031 exchange trends and the deadlines, et cetera.
Well, good. So, and I have a couple of questions. One thing that obviously it's a problem if somebody's in the middle of an exchange right now, they can't inspect a property. People, if there's people living there or whatever, with the lockdown, even though you may get out of your home, you can't necessarily go in somebody else's apartment or depending on the type of property it is. So that we're running into a big problem. So I can imagine that if the lockdown gets extended, which it doesn't look like it's going to, but you don't know, that may extend the deadline further out. And the other thing, give me a feel for this. We got a feeling that a lot of people are holding off, which makes sense when they want to put an offer on something. But then I can see hitting July 15th, and we've got a kind of a pent-up demand between buyers, and we might get this huge flood that first week of July, first and second week of July, of people suddenly throwing in offers. And we may see multiple offers on properties just because there's a pent-up demand of all these people that were holding off until then. So I'm thinking that probably not a good idea to leave it till the end of the your 45-day period if it's going to be July 15th. You should definitely get some offers in well before that. What's your feeling on that?
I would absolutely agree with that. I think that's going to happen. People are going to be looking at properties when and if they can, and then as they get closer to that deadline, there's going to be a whole bunch of people with the same deadline. It's going to be a tough one. And then I think at that point too, we'll know a lot more as to where we're at in the cycle. Did we really survive and get through the whole bad part of COVID-19, et cetera? And I think at that point, we're going to see people getting out there to do deals. So I think we're going to see a spike for both reasons. The fact that the deadline is there and people are ready to do deals on top of that.
Right. Okay. And then another question I have, and you may not know the answer to this, but any idea about pricing? Like, are you seeing any or getting any feedback, because you're dealing with a lot of realtors and stuff? Any feedback on are prices dropping? Are they staying the same? Or are buyer or sellers just holding out right now and seeing how it goes? I'm trying to get a feel for that. And I realize it's still kind of early in this. So we're not really getting any positive data yet because it's still kind of early. But I don't know. Just want to get some feedback from you.
Sure. We've seen a little bit of like repricing on the part of the sellers, repricing on the part of lenders in terms of valuations, but not very much. I think in most cases, the sellers are kind of hunkering down, and if they've listed their property, they're just waiting because people can't go out and look. And if they haven't listed, they're just waiting until this passes. Most of the folks I talk to, they're not really seeing any discounts in pricing or property valuations. I think we're just they're just hunkering down, and they'll come out the back end, and I think it'll be almost kind of the status quo. There'll be certain segments that might get hit a little more than others. I mean, there's certainly the concern of once we get past all this, will more people begin to work from home, and then therefore commercial office space might be an issue. There's certainly been a lot of small retail companies, mom and pop shops that may not make it at all, even with the loan programs, and so we may have some more additional stress in the retail sector, but for the most part, we haven't seen much in the way of prices dropping.
Well, that's good to hear. Well, I guess it's good or bad. If you're a seller, that's good. If you're a buyer, we're hoping to get some good deals.
True, absolutely.
But,
yep, so true.
I'm sure there's going to be, again, certain sectors are going to be fine. Like, for example, I have a client of mine that has a property down in Moreno Valley, industrial land, that's a huge logistics area, and he had it in escrow with another buyer, and it looks like it's falling out, but he immediately had another buyer step to the plate, almost double what he was originally selling it for, and they're turning it into a huge warehouse fulfillment center. So I think anything to do with e-commerce, logistics, warehousing, that whole area seems to be very strong and not dropping at all. But again, you're right, retail is probably going to be a tough one for quite a while, because we were actually talking to a company today, and they're saying that they did a survey, and 75% of the people out there are very reluctant to go back to a shopping center. So I think shopping centers and retail is definitely going to have a big change. And I guess the jury's still out on office, but I can see a lot of people. Look, I've gotten used to working here at home, and it's kind of nice.
Yeah.
So,
although I swear I work longer and harder now that I work from home than I ever did before.
Oh, really? Yeah, I can see that. But it's kind of nice. I don't have to get dressed in the morning. I can sit on the back and have my coffee and do my Zoom calls like this. So,
Absolutely.
there's a lot of things to be said. Once the first week was kind of weird, but then we kind of got used to it. Now we have set meetings. And so I can see a lot of people saying, hey, look, I'd rather work from home. Why should I come to the office? Now that we've got systems in and get used to it. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting how some of these markets play out. So again, it's still kind of early to really know for sure what's going to happen, but it's definitely, some indicators of where that's going to go. Now, what are you seeing as far as maybe, 5-6 months out, or even by the end of the year? I mean, again, you're an accommodator, so you're not necessarily a realtor, but at least, you get some feedback from guys.
Yeah, we're kind of a lagging indicator, I guess. We're kind of the tail end of the transaction when it closes. But I'm more optimistic than I thought I would be for the last 6 months of the year. I think people have really proved to be very resilient, and I think they're going to bounce back quicker than people expect. There's going to be areas where it doesn't bounce back fast, but I think in a lot of cases, especially for real estate, I mean, interest rates are so incredibly low right now. Now's the time to do deals. So I think there's a lot of pent-up demand. I think people want to do deals. I think the economy was great before this hit. The labor market was great before this hit. So I just think it's going to bounce back faster than people think. There'll be some residual stuff, and there may be some folks like retail. They're not going to want to go back to the malls for a while. And so sectors like that might take longer to recover. But I'm feeling good about the real estate market.
Good. No, that's good to hear. Again, we're dealing with a lot of people that are selling here in LA, and they they want to sell. So let's hope it holds up for those guys. But there will be some deals popping up here and there. I don't think, again, a lot of people are kind of holding out thinking, oh, I'm going to get some fantastic deal. And you're right, there are going to be some fantastic deals if you're buying a building that has a restaurant in it or something like that. But I don't know if we're going to see a whole lot of deals in some of the other sectors like multifamily or industrial.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my gut feeling.
Some of the initial statistics that came out just from the standard news media showed that 80 to 85% of multifamily property tenants were not paying the rent. And then some more reliable data came out, and it looks like it's more 91, 92% are actually paying the rent. I shouldn't say weren't. So 80 to 85 were paying rent, and the balance was not. And when the more reliable data looks like more 91, 92% are actually paying rent. So it's not what they were trying to portray. So I just think there's a lot of positives there. People are hunkering down and doing what they got to do.
Right. No, I think we're seeing similar trends from what we're talking to. Well, good. Well, I think, was there anything else you want to add to that, or?
No, I think we're good. I think it's a good kind of a summary of what we're seeing out there in the trends and everything.
Okay, good. So again, there may be some changes in the 1031 rules. If the extension gets changed or whatever, we'll definitely have Bill back. Maybe we'll talk again in another 3 or 4 weeks and get another update, because we'll be kind of right in the middle of the whole period of the extension. So it might be a good time to do an update again then. So yeah, thanks a lot, Bill. Really appreciate it.
Sure, my pleasure. Anytime. Take care, guys.
Now we're going to be talking about interest rates and the lending world. And as you know, we've had this major shock to our entire economy and the entire financial world. And so it's really important we kind of keep abreast of that, because lending is obviously very important to the real estate market. And so I'm going to have Charles Elkins here talk. And Charles, why don't you give us a little bit about your background?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for having me. My name is Charles Elkins. I'm with UMS Pros. We're a private money lender throughout the United States, offices in 4 different states. Basically, we've been in the private lending space for about almost 15 years now. And we started off with just lending our own money. And people came to us and said, here, would you put some of mine in your fund? And one thing led to another. Wall Street kind of got behind us, and we basically do about 6,000 private money loans a year. I've been in this lending space most of my life, owning different mortgage companies and 2 different companies, and the private space is definitely where we have excelled. We built a nice background of speaking engagements. I speak at different very large investor events, and have had a good opportunity to meet a completely different spectrum of investor, from apartment to commercial properties, high rise, to single family homes. And single family homes and apartments is where we seem to excel, and where the bulk of our customer base lies. This investment world is changing in the lending area right now. And let me just give you a little history of what went on. A lot of people just don't understand. And in a typical lending situation, private money, hard money, as it's referred to often, the lender like me funds a loan out of a fund, and you as an investor would buy a property or refinance, and we would fund it, and then we go securitize that, put it together with a bunch of other loans, and sell that package, for lack of a better word, we're going to say, to Wall Street. And they may back it with bonds or do other things, but it's packed up and it's sold to different aggregators. And then they would actually pack it up again, maybe in a bigger package, and sell it to like Prudential Insurance or General Motors Credit Union, or whoever it might be. And they buy that as an investment portfolio, part of their portfolio. What's happened is, particularly the difference between a conventional bank type of loan and a private money loan, a hard money loan. What's happened is we would fund a loan here 6 or 8 weeks ago, and we would go to securitize that and put it in a package and sell it. And the other end would wind up paying us in the beginning 90 cents on a dollar. So if you funded $1 million of loans, you would normally go sell it for $1 million, or maybe even $1.1 million. And now you'd go to for lack of a better word, the window, and you go to sell it, and they only want to give you $900,000. And it was a screeching halt. It was overnight. And what basically has happened is the underlying investors, the people that manage the funds that own these bonds, they have got nervous about the valuations of properties. So they're worried about, in this loan that we made, the appraisal came in at $300,000, and during the time of doing the loan, packing it up, securitizing it with some other loans, putting it in a package and selling to them, now the property's worth $250 because of the virus and the economy's things that are happening in the marketplace. So that's your big difference. I've been in this business most of my life, and I've never seen it like this. I've been through the 9/11, the mortgage meltdowns, the 2008, the subprime mess, etc. Been through it, and it's always dipped and recovered. And this time, one of the things we're seeing is investors are telling us that they're not seeing the property values slide like we anticipated. And in fact, if you have a single-family home for rent right now, there seems to be a higher demand than investors have ever seen. So it's kind of a different situation we live in. And right now, private money is basically lending at 65 cents on a dollar. So you're basically looking at, if you go purchase a property, usually somebody like UMS pros like us, we would be lending 90% of the purchase price. Today, it's 65% of the purchase price. And if you're looking for a rehab loan to do some rehab on the property, that may or may not be available, and it's at a high rate and a very low LTV. So Rusty, things have really changed, and there's a lot of money poured into the other side of it, the buying side, to buy these loans. We see the numbers. The funds are building up with very large amounts of money, but they're not spending it. They're sitting on it because the actual underlying investor is scared of the values of the properties, and they want to just sit back and watch it and not commit to anything until they see what the appraisals and so forth are going to be coming in here. And I expect this to probably last throughout this year.
I got it. And are you, yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, we're still kind of early on in this whole economic shock, so I guess we'll see how this plays out over the next few months. But you are seeing pretty much a big slowdown just because both sides are scared. The investors scared and the lenders scared. So they're all kind of holding out a little bit. Is that basically what you're saying?
Because of the virus, the appraiser doesn't want to go in the house. He doesn't want to be exposed to the virus, and wearing a mask, supposedly helps or doesn't help, but he doesn't want the exposure. So you have the problem of appraisals. The few appraisers that are out there, they are busy and sometimes taking weeks to process to get them out to a property. On the conventional side, the bank side, we also have a division that does bank type loans. And in answer to your question of why do we see rates coming down, but on the private money side, it's kind of stuck. The government buys those loans. So whereas we securitize a package of loans and sell them to an investor, and I'm going to call it Wall Street, the difference is when we do conventional loans, we sell it to the U.S. Treasury, Fannie Mae, Freddie, etc., and you sell it in one day, and you because you lock the rate and you follow their guidelines, you know what you're going to get paid for it. There's no doubt. So as rates have come down on the conventional side, in order to keep the economy going, the feds are really stretching out, and they're not showing the concern that the private money is showing. And the feds will take a hit on that, and they know it, that if the housing market collapses, they're going to be upside down on some mortgages. But right now, it's the only way to keep the economy going, and so they're taking that risk. And on the conventional side, as an investor, the investor can still get a conventional loan. It's full doc, tax returns, paycheck stubs, qualifying. all that type of stuff through a bank loan, and you can get those. They're relatively cheap. They're not too difficult to get. And the private money side is really on timeout right now. We're actually recommending to customers just sit on the sidelines and let this thing settle down a little bit. You know, some people can't afford to do that and some can't. And some of the ones that are kind of stuck in the middle, you know, they're seeing it's tough to get a loan to buy properties at this time.
So as far as interest rates go with lending, so we've seen that the Fed's dropped the rates quite a bit, but we haven't necessarily seen the rates drop for private lending or other types of mortgages, have we?
No, private money is kind of like your paycheck almost. You might see prime rate go up and down, but you don't want your wages, you know, your hourly rate to go down or whatever. It's kind of fixed, and all of your expenses are based on your paycheck. It's kind of like that in private money. Is they want a certain return on their money, and just because the economy's having hiccups, they don't really want to take a big reduction in income. So they're holding to their guns on the rates. If anything, they might even be raising them right now. The real problem is liquidity. They just don't trust the valuations. And again, they're afraid, you know, they have a loan come into them for $300,000 and tomorrow it's worth $250 or whatever the number is. And so they're sitting on the sidelines right now and just accumulating money. And it's pretty tough to get that, you know, that traditional hard money loan out there.
Got it. Well, I guess the good thing is that there is a lot of cash out there that when things do calm down, it will come back in the market, whether it's to buy property or to do lending. It's not like when we went through back in 2008 where the capital markets just evaporated. Seems like in this market, there's still a lot of capital out there. We're just waiting it out to see just how things stabilize first, right?
I think what I have seen and over many years in this business is it's kind of like in the old days in the gas business. If you remember when you used to buy gas and you drive down the street and it was 29 cents a gallon or 39 cents a gallon or some number, and all of a sudden one day the price would go up to 75 cents a gallon or whatever. It was just like instant. Every gas station, it was like shock. It's kind of like that. We're going to see the same thing. You're going to see the lending go away, the private money go away, which it has right now. And again, there's some out there, but it's sporadic. A lot of money being built up, but they're going to come back at higher rates. They're going to come back at reduced valuations, LTVs and so forth. They're not going to start right off where they were. I think you're going to see a little bit of hey, it's a good opportunity to try to make more money and be a little more conservative. And I think you're going to see some of that coming back. That's what's happened in each one of the downturns previously. They have come back with lending, but it's not as aggressive. It takes the competitive pressures over the course of time where everybody's trying to one up the next guy, and the competitive pressures force the market down. I think you're probably going to see some little tougher, tighter loan qualifications and a little higher rates and lower LTVs going forward here for a little while.
Got it. Okay, good. Well, thank you for that. But yeah, you were talking about the properties you own, and we've worked with you. In fact, we just closed with a client of ours. He bought a whole portfolio of properties from you in Texas. Maybe you can give us a little bit of overview of why Texas, particularly the market that you're in, which is Beaumont, Texas, is a little different than other markets as far as the job market and the rental market, et cetera.
Yeah, we got into that market. We own rentals. We're in Los Angeles and live in Los Angeles, and we lend all over the country. And I've had the opportunity to speak from New York City to Charlotte to Miami and everywhere else at different investor events. And I've heard, you know, the opportunities and the pitfalls in different markets. And we opened up an office in Houston and had some large investors. And one investor had hundreds of rental homes and was buying hundreds more. And we were really lending a lot of money in that market. And so I went personally to meet the investor and get to know him a little more. You know, we're writing checks for a lot of money, and I just want to make sure and get a handle on things. And over the course of time, I really saw the opportunity that he saw, and it was so good that we actually have joined in. And now, basically 3 years later, we're heavily committed in that market and continually commit more regularly. the thing here is in Texas, they did not have the downturn in this last downturn, what we call the subprime mess, the mortgage meltdown. They did not have the downturn that everybody else had. Employment stayed higher than the rest of the country. Foreclosures were less than the rest of the country, etc. And it used to be driven in Texas on oil. And even though that's still a big part of the economy, there's a whole lot of other infrastructure around that's non-oil that has built up. And you see that. It's the Port of Houston unloads almost as much containers and container ships coming from China and everywhere else as Long Beach does. Stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff going up. Apple and Amazon and everybody have built huge infrastructures down there as part of their program. So we saw what was happening and how the economy down there was kind of different than a lot of other parts of the country. And in particularly, when I went down, I spent some time with this one investor, and he took me about an hour and a half east of Houston on your way towards Louisiana to a city called Beaumont, Texas. And just a little blue-collar city. And, nothing impressive, nothing really whatever. Typical home price is $200,000, give or take. They have $1 million houses, and they have some $60,000 houses. But the first thing I noticed when I went to Beaumont was I never, and again, I've been there for 3 years, I've never seen a homeless person in Beaumont, never. And what it is, the employment situation is so good that if you're homeless on the streets, they give you lots of different opportunities, including giving you a house. In California, we're used to Section 8, where they help people out. In Beaumont, they actually, pick people that have, issues and would normally be homeless in Los Angeles, and they give them a house, they give them script to go buy food and stuff. And it's completely different, 100% different than I'm used to in Los Angeles. I have houses in Beverly Hills, houses in North Hollywood, etc., and literally within feet, yards from the front door of my, $3-4 million houses that I want to fix and flip here. There's somebody sleeping in a sleeping bag on the street, and maybe under a bridge, another 30 people and stuff. You don't see any of that in Beaumont, and I was really kind of surprised with that coming from LA and what I've seen in LA. And what it is, it's the employment situation. You can go get a job in Beaumont making $35 an hour. If you apply at 10 in the morning, you start work at noon. It's amazing, and we don't see that changing. There's a lot of stuff being built, including the Deepwater port. When Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, it blew in a bunch of sand, and you can't. They don't have the ability like they used to unload ships and cargo and oil back and forth and so forth like they used to. And so they're really struggling, and they don't see that that's ever going to change. And so they decided to come over to Beaumont and build a deep water port. They're also building a bunch of refineries. The chemical companies have moved in. Dow and Monsanto are building down there. And it is absolutely an employment heaven. It's amazing. So in the rental houses, the typical person is coming in from out of town. They've been earning 12 to 15 bucks an hour in an unskilled job in Seattle or in Wisconsin or even in Canada. And they come in and they apply, and they can go to work the same day. It's amazing, the employment situation. And they don't see that changing for 10 years. And that leads to a robust rental market and good, solid, blue-collar person that's renting a house. These are people that, husband and wife been working, earning, combined income of 40, 45 grand a year somewhere, and all of a sudden they come to Beaumont with overtime, and both of them working and stuff, they're making 150 grand a year. And it has just made a perfect world in the rental market. The appreciation is okay. It's a little bit, and most is because these people are coming in from out of the area, and they've had their credit hurt. They had a foreclosure 3 or 4 years ago. They haven't been making a lot of money. They're not necessarily bad credit. They're just not the best at credit. They're 600, 620s type people, and they're gonna be tremendous buyers of houses someday, but they need to get on their feet, and that just makes it an absolute tremendous rental market. So we really like Beaumont, Texas, and everything we buy down there is single family home, kind of in the better areas, a little better house. We have a dedicated crew down there that we shipped in from Bakersfield, California, a Hispanic team, 4 people. We have a manager that we imported from California down there. We give these people a house to live in, one of our houses, and they work exclusively on our houses, fixing them up, renting them, keeping them maintained, and so forth. So we've kind of got the whole assembly line, and it's a good operation, and probably one of the best return on investments I've ever been involved in.
Very good. Yeah. Like I said, we just closed with a portfolio. One of our clients is doing a 1031 exchange and bought 6-year homes. And then we have a couple other clients in the process of buying them as well. And so I was out there a couple months ago before the whole coronavirus thing, and I was impressed. It's a very nice little tight market. And yeah, I mean, I was seeing what you were doing. You were totally renovating the homes and putting the tenant in there. And so yeah, it's a great little market. And again, you know, like you were saying, Charles, even though oil went down to a ridiculously low price, and I'm curious to see how long it stays down here, this low price, but because they're building there and it's long-term projects, the price of oil will make absolutely no difference with what's going on in Beaumont, correct?
Yeah, they're building 4 new refineries there, and the largest refinery, and they're putting billions into it. It's going to take 7 years to build this refinery. It's being built by Saudi Arabia. And just to give you a little bit touch on the oil real quick, is the United States, it costs about $30 a barrel to get oil to market coming out of the Permian Basin or wherever. And Saudi Arabia, it costs about $6 a barrel. So when the price of oil goes down, the Permian Basin, the offshore, et cetera, they shut down and quit pumping, because every gallon that they pump, they lose money on it if they sell it at today's prices. Saudi Arabia does it. Their cost of goods is much lower than everybody's. And so they actually, I just saw an article, I had sent it to you the other day, Rusty, the imports the first week of April from Saudi Arabia to the United States, in 1 week, they went as much as they imported last year in a year. And all of that oil is going to come into Beaumont, because of the port, and they can offload it in the terminals there. The refinery that's being built, they currently have other refineries now that are handling that import product. So it's not going to affect Beaumont. It's going to affect Long Beach. It's going to affect Seattle, places like that. You're going to have a big, because they're so tied to, even Houston, they're so tied to the price of U.S. oil. In Beaumont, if U.S. oil is going crazy, the Permian Basin is pumping and everything's good, then they're processing that. And we get in this downturn, Saudi Arabia just starts bringing in and taking advantage of the marketplace. So we haven't seen any disruption whatsoever with the price of oil in regards to the marketplace in Beaumont. The virus is obviously causing issues, but the oil companies, most of this, the big employment right now is building 4 new refineries and a deep water port. Those are thousands and thousands of people. They say they constantly are behind 4,000 new jobs that they need people for. And the starting wages now is $38 an hour. If you're sweeping the floors, you can start work, and you can work your normal 40 hours at that, and then time and a half and double time everything else and work all the overtime you want. And I've seen people that used to make, in Minnesota, used to make $1,500 a month, making $1,500 a week when they moved to Beaumont. So the price of oil, we don't see it changing. And because it's construction, they're outside working, not congregated around each other like they would in some sort of a tighter environment. And so they haven't shut down near as much as other parts of the country because of the virus.
Well, that's great to hear. I mean, obviously there's some pockets that are still holding up despite what's happening in the rest of the country. So that's really good to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've even had some properties just in the last week or two that you finished renovating and put on the market to rent. And how was the rental market when you put them on? Again, just in the last few weeks.
You know, it's funny is we had a house that they were putting some new flooring in. And so they're taking the old flooring out, throwing it out in the front yard. You know, they'll get a trailer and they'll haul it off, and they're going to put the new flooring in. And they have stacks of flooring out front of the house. They're ripping out the old, with crowbars and saws and stuff. And they had 7 people come in. They had a bunch of people. They had 7 people literally while they were tearing the place up and putting new flooring, want to rent the place, and one person actually brought $1,000 cashier's check to put a deposit on it. And this house wasn't even done yet. I mean, they were just putting flooring in it. They still have to do, a whole bunch of work and appliances and paint and go through it. And they rented it while they're in the middle of rehabbing it. That's how. And these people that rented it are in a hotel, and they're paying $75 a night, $79 a night. And they're in a hotel. They came from out of town. They can afford the hotel because of the wages, but they really want to get into a place, and it's kind of like supply and demand. It just is not there. And to find a nice 3-4 bedroom house, 2-bath, single family home that's been renovated and clean and newer appliances and so forth just is hard to come by. And they're renting them before we even finish them.
Wow. Yeah, and that's surprising considering, as we do this talk, it's right near the end of April, and so the market is still that strong there, even though what we're seeing.
We set up with remote locks on the front doors and video walkthroughs on a couple properties, and we can let somebody in remotely. They can go in, look around, etc. We did all that, and we didn't even need to. The house rented before we could even get the locks installed. So it's been so far so good. And we have a lot of houses. So we're not talking a few little houses here. We're talking quite an abundance of houses. And it's the same thing everywhere. It's a strong, strong market. And we don't see it changing. When the virus hit, we thought, oh my gosh, we're going to be hurting. And we did not have one person miss their April 1st rent. We have 100% payment on rents. And then now a lot of people starting to get their unemployment checks. People starting to get, their help from the government checks, et cetera, and they're actually in a very strong position. We only have, of all the houses, we only have 12 people that are laid off. And of the 12, 9 of them are still being paid by their employer. So we have not seen any hiccup whatsoever in the rental market at all. And boy, we knock on wood. It's nice to be, because we were real worried about that before.
No, that's really good. I'm glad to hear some good news. After watching the news every night, what's going on in the rest of the country, it's actually been pretty depressing. But it's great to hear that there's a market that's actually doing well. So why don't we just give us an idea.
We have houses in other markets, in other states, and we actually in one market we have 22 houses, and I think the property manager said 19 people still have not paid all their rent for April. They're making payments. They're paying $100 a week. They're waiting on this check and that check and waiting on that. And, it's 85% are having trouble making the rent. And in Beaumont, we're 100%, and it's amazing. So it's, knock on wood, we wish we had less elsewhere and more in Beaumont right now.
No, that's great. And then maybe we could just kind of end off here, letting us know what kind of price range, what kind of cash flow, if anybody's interested in buying some.
Yeah, basically you can get a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house that rents for around $1,200 to $1,300 a month for around $135,000. We have, bigger houses, more expensive or less. We have not sold one house in almost 3 years, and at all. None. We're not into the buy and sell. We do that in California. We've done some flipping, and actually a little bit in some other states. But it's not really our business model. We're lenders, and we're in the lending space, and the other is more of a hobby. And we had a family member that was out of work, and we actually had them start kind of buying some houses, and that's how we kind of got into the heavy thing. But I think the most important thing that we could say is the house at $135,000 that rents for $1,200. That's a nice return when you're picking up another 3 to 5% appreciation. You're writing it off. You're taking a nice little tax return hit on depreciation, and at the same time, we just talked about how secure the rents are. That's really important, because if all of us take our Excel sheets and do our math, and boy, everything looks wonderful on paper, and it doesn't quite turn out like that all the time. And Beaumont does turn out like the Excel sheet shows. So 135,000, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, rents are usually around $1,200 a month. We have in Beaumont a full property management operation. We imported one of the best property managers we've ever had the opportunity to know. We actually brought them in from California, gave them a house, moved their family there. Been there 2.5 years. We have 4 salaried workers that work exclusively for us. We bought them a van and stuff, and they do the original rehab on the houses, and they go do any repair that a tenant might need, and so forth. So it turns out to be an extremely good opportunity, and return on investment. I had yet to see it. Anything that I've been involved in. I've been in the stock market, and Rusty and I were talking about the oil contracts, etc. I've yet to see anything that's so stable as these single-family homes in Beaumont.
Great, good. No, thank you for that, Charles. So yeah, if anybody's interested, let us know, because Charles does have a small inventory right now available that he's selling. And if you give us a call in our office, we can kind of go over that with you. But yeah, no, thanks, Charles. Thanks for the update on the lending industry. Very interesting to see how that plays out over the next few months. And thanks for the update on the market in Beaumont.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Rusty. It's definitely a challenging market out there. I think the lending will recover. It's definitely going to recover. It might not come back as quick as investors would like, but again, as investors have issues with their lending, or they have questions, just kind of don't know which way to go or whatever, we're here for them, happy to answer questions. Just have them get a hold of you and give us a call, and let's answer their questions and see if we can help them through and give them the benefit of some of what we're seeing.
Great. All right. Well, thanks again, Charles, and keep healthy.
All right. Thanks a lot. Take care, Rusty. Bye.
Well, thank you, everybody. Hopefully the information we gave you today was helpful. And again, this was part 5. We're going to continue to do these. We've decided to do them every 1st and the 15th of the month. So the next one we're going to be doing is in 2 weeks on May 15th. On that one, we're going to have an update for you folks of what's happening with California tenant laws. We're going to have the president, actually, of the AAGLA, Apartments Association of Greater Los Angeles, talking. That's very important if you own any kind of rentals in Los Angeles or really anywhere in California. And we're also going to be talking about a lot of new rule changes, which goes to your benefit if you want to put an ADU added to any kind of property you have. And we feel that there's some real opportunities there as well. So we're going to be walking you through all that. So in the meantime, let's all cross our fingers, and hopefully we'll get through this, this resurgence happens, after the lockdowns are lifted. And let's hope that happens sooner than later, and that things do get back to normal quickly. In the meantime, everybody stay healthy. And if anybody wants to have a free consultation, just email us or call in. We're very busy, actually, believe it or not. April's been one of our better months. We've had a lot of 1031 exchanges coming through. And a lot of the properties we've been doing actually have closing. We haven't anything not closed, which is great. We just had closing just this week, last week as well. So yeah, if anyone's out there in a 1031 exchange, we have some very good properties available that are in other markets like we've been talking about. But yeah, give us a call and we'll do a free consultation. So thank you, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you May 15th.